You're listening to the Effective Statistician podcast, a podcast designed to help you reach your potential, lead great science, and serve patients. This time it's episode number 66, Presenting with Impact. 7 mistakes to avoid, an interview with Julia Carter. Welcome to the Effective Statistician with Alexander Schacht and Benjamin Pieske, the weekly podcast for statisticians in the health sector who want to reach their potential to serve patients without becoming overwhelmed by work. So, for this episode, unfortunately, I had another time a little bit recording problems. Julia's message comes across pretty good. There's a little bit of a problem with my voice, but you can still get lots of very, very good content, just not this time with beautiful quality. But quality from content for sure. One thing that I would like to say is we are starting an abstract writing challenge, and we're specifically targeting the next PSI conference next year in Barcelona because the submission deadline for that is usually around November. But if you are not going to this conference, but to another conference next year, join the challenge. Just go to theeffectivestatistician.com/abstract challenge, or one word, and register your interest there. So today we are going about a couple of different mistakes that I actually see quite a lot, even in very good presentations. And to be honest, I made some of these mistakes recently myself. So get into this episode and enjoy listening to the discussion with Julia Carter. We are speaking about things from setting up the logistics correctly up to how you can end strongly. So, and the other thing is, stay to the end, because there's really nice things that Julia Carter will offer you at the end. It's an amazing opportunity, and listen fast because I'm pretty sure this opportunity will close very, very fast. This podcast is, like usual, created in association with PSI, an awesome global member organization dedicated to leading and promoting best practice and industry initiatives. You can join PSI today if you haven't done yet and develop further your statistical capabilities with access to the special interest groups, the pretty awesome video on demand content library, free registration to all PSI webinars, and much more. Just visit the PSI website at psiweb.org to learn more about PSI activities and become a PSI member today. Welcome to another episode of the Effective Statistician, and this time I have a guest that we already had last year on the Effective Statistician. It's again Julia Carter. Hi Julia, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, and it's great to be back.
Yeah, it's really awesome to have you back. And this time we are speaking about presenting with impact and how to avoid common mistakes in this area. And but maybe Julia, you can give first a little bit of an introduction of what have you been up to and why you're interested in this topic.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So my training and coaching business, S4, specializes in supporting leaders, teams, and individuals to be as effective as they possibly can be in the roles that they do. The majority of people we work with are technical experts, and presenting with impact, having presence, being impactful are all of the areas we often get asked for, especially within virtual settings as well. So I do a lot of my training to virtual teams and really supporting them to have a brand that's positive, that's people perceive them as being effective, and that people can see them even though they're not actually necessarily in the room with them every single day. So presenting with impact, which is what we're going to be talking about today, I think traditionally we would consider, presenting in a room with people around us. But, in today's world, we also really need to consider when we present with impact, it's not necessarily with people in the room with us. And so that puts another layer of challenge into the situation.
Yeah. And so we need to kind of be better in managing these things. But also, I think we as statisticians, and you gave a training to statisticians where I was in the room as well, and said we are very often kind of focused more from the technical part, and getting our message across is really important for driving things forward to make sure that we understood, and also that I have the learning for myself. It creates much more job satisfaction for me when I can see that actually things happen because of my ideas, and I can drive things forward. And because it can be quite frustrating if you have these ideas and you want these others to do these things, but they don't get it. And you get out of a presentation and afterwards you think, they didn't get it. So it's kind of really frustrating.
Absolutely. And whilst you can be so passionate or ensconced in a particular topic, and possibly a very technical topic with what you do, it's how do you get that across in a passionate way? How do you put passion into something that's can be very dry? And especially if you as an individual don't have one of those sort of very bubbly, charismatic, natural energies about you, it's a real challenge, but it's not a challenge that cannot be overcome. So hopefully what I'll be sharing today will help people be able to step up into a more impactful presenter, whatever it is that they are presenting.
Okay, awesome. So we'll talk about basically a little bit from the negative side today. So we'll focus on 7 common mistakes that people do and give you some things about how to overcome these problems. So let's start with number 1, Julia.
Okay, so the first thing to really watch out for and where things can go terribly wrong is right at the very beginning, even before the presentation has started. And this is around getting the logistics wrong. And logistics can be anything from how is the room set up, how is the technology set up, even down to the joining instructions, even down to the time that people need to turn up, pre-work, etc., etc. So there's lots of things we could talk about. But one thing I wanted to just highlight really is in the sort of traditional sense of presenting, nowadays, it's much more common to have the room set up in more of a what we call cabaret style, so that people are sitting around tables of maybe 5 or 6 people. And the reason that rather than in rows of chairs, and it just makes the energy in the room much more collaborative and connected. So I would say actually the room setup with round tables, ideally, even if you've only got 12 or 15 people in the room, to have 2 or 3 tables, it makes a huge difference. And you then, when you do your presentation, can enable conversations to happen. So you get more almost facilitation going on rather than just having to do a very dry presentation, which obviously helps engagement. The only other thing I wanted to also just mention on room, wherever you can, please try not to do presentations where you have a big boardroom table in the middle of the room, because again, creating connection around that is so much harder. When I do my team development, I always try and insist that there are no tables in the room and that we can sit together. It creates barriers. So you're setting yourself up with a bigger challenge of connection when you have physical barriers like tables in the middle of the room. I appreciate it's not always possible to demand a room is reorganized for your presentation. And the only other one is thinking about the amount of light coming into a room. I'm sure you've all been in situations where you've been in darkened conference rooms with curtains and no windows. It's tough. It's much harder to get connection in the right environment than rooms that are more light. So those are just some of the things off the top of my head. There's many more. A technical one, I would always say make sure you have a backup laptop in the background with the presentation already loaded on it in case of failure of IT technology, and ideally a connection that isn't reliant on Wi-Fi as a backup. So there's quite a few in there.
Actually, I think let's kind of focus a little bit on the room setup. What I also think is really important that you first actually look into the room before you present, or maybe you know the room, and to figure out where best to stand to have a connection with the audience, so that you're not constantly turning your back to the audience when you want to have a look at the slide. So I really like the presenter view with PowerPoint. If you're using slides, that you have the laptop in front of you where you see the presenter part and you have the slides behind you. So that really you face the audience instead of, looking back to the slides.
Absolutely. Yeah. And ideally, if you can, the screen should really be to the side so that you are in the middle. But often a lot of the, especially within corporations, the screen is right in the middle where ideally you would be standing.
And in these kind of settings, I always try to, go a little bit more in the room. So not just, stand behind the desk that is maybe there or something like this, but really, go into the room, own the stage, so to say, to build more connection with the audience.
Yeah. And I think on that one as well, I mean, for me, it's very easy because I see myself as a facilitator / trainer. So I think if you put that training hat on, you can walk around, you create connection, you can ask questions, you almost have a facilitative style of presenting, and it creates conversation and gets much more audience engagement. So whenever I present, I rarely have to do formal presentations where there would be no interaction. So that might help for people who don't do this as a day job, to see yourself more as a facilitator of information, sharing information and creating conversation, and it actually might help with nerves as well if you do that. But it does take practice, I guess.
Yeah. But I think also kind of checking all these logistics up earlier helps to manage nerves, because then you don't get surprised because, the wrong slides were uploaded at a conference, or the slides are not showing properly because they don't have the latest PowerPoint version or whatsoever, all these kind of different things. So that's really good. By the way, if you're presenting at a conference, it's always good to have your own kind of computer and slide sets with you, so kind of as a backup. In terms of the virtual setting, what's your advice there in terms of tracking logistics?
Absolutely. I could do a whole hour just on virtual. There's many. Is the camera going to be on or off? If it's going to be on, which is my preference, those of you who've maybe heard me talk before, I have a mantra about turn on your camera because it creates connection. But then you need to consider the background behind you, the making sure no one's going to disturb you, telephone ringing, dogs barking, delivery vans turning up, lots and lots of things to think about. Your environment, the light, if you're using a camera, the sun shining in. So that's just from a sort of environmental perspective. There's lots of things to consider. What I will say is, for anyone who hasn't done virtual delivery with camera on, I promise you, the more you do it, it will just become second nature after a while. So it's just a matter of getting over the fear of having the camera on and thinking you're going to look not great, or whatever mindset stuff is coming up. Just do it, because I don't even think twice now. And it makes so much more connection. I do a lot of my training now or presenting through virtual. What is the point of spending half a day traveling to do a 1 hour presentation? It can be done from my desk in an hour, finished, and then the next meeting starts 20 minutes later. So it really, people do need, in my opinion, to be doing more of this sharing of their expertise while sitting in their home office, assuming it's a home office we're talking about. It might be, of course, a corporate office somewhere else, but it needs to be quiet. It needs to feel, it doesn't need to be, I think if people are working from home, I wouldn't worry so much about the external environment as long as it's not unprofessional. But anyway, so that from an environmental perspective, I always have a backup laptop ready in the background. I've had to use it a couple of times for strange reasons, just computers crashing at the last minute, and having a 3G connection that you can access, or a backup version. The other thing is being able to send the slides to somebody else quickly if needs be. If you can't share your screen, sometimes that happens for different reasons, different technologies. Make sure you are familiar with the technology you're using, especially if you're using another company's technology. Don't be surprised. Often employees within companies do not know how their own system works. So, for example, if I need my screen shared, they don't know how to allow that to happen. So I have to know how that happens in their company. So it's just about getting familiar with it all, and then you're good to go. I mean, it's such a fabulous way of having some really connecting presentations without ever actually meeting the people.
And I completely agree with the turn on the camera thing.
Good. Yay.
That's the mantra of myself, and I get so much difference between those conversations where both turn on the camera compared to those where at least one doesn't turn on the camera. It's really big difference.
Yeah. that's I love it. Perfect timing to prove my point.
I'm working from home, and of course now
love it. Forgotten to turn off the phone. It's great. There you are. And you know, it's fine in today's world. But that's a great example. I just wanted to, presenting with impact is what we're talking about. How can you be impactful if you are invisible? And you wouldn't come to work invisible, with a white sheet over you. So why would you not turn on your camera? But I could, Alex, I can go on about that for a long time. So maybe we should move on.
Completely agree. Let's move on to topic number 2, or mistake number 2.
Yes. So this is around not having enough clarity about your desired outcome from the presentation. And I think this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make. Being really, really clear that you are thinking about what is their agenda. And when I say their agenda, I mean the audience's agenda. So the mistakes I see people make is they do presentations, it's all about them. It's not about the person or the people who are on the receiving end. So this is the biggest failure. So it's really understanding about what they want. What do they want to hear? What are their problems? What are their expectations? What is it that they want from the presentation? And making that the foundation of your when you prepare the content. So that's the biggest mistake I see. And what you end up there, if you haven't got that clarity, you end up with a presentation that can go in all different directions, and at the end of it, the audience thinking, "Well, so what?" And some of the other things. The sort of next steps, the call to action at the end, summarizing, etc. These are all things that we cover when we run our Presenting with Impact program. But getting real clarity about why am I doing this presentation and what is it they want to hear and how do I summarize is a really important one.
So for me, communication is about being effective, and communication is only then effective if it reaches a desired goal, if it moves the persons from one side to the other. And if you don't know what that is that you want the people to move, whether, you want them to believe something different, if you want them to act differently, if you these kind of different things. If you're not clear about that, you never know whether you have done a good job, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, just for people who get nervous when they're presenting, if you make the presentation about them, it takes the pressure off you because the spotlight isn't on you. So it's a mindset thing, really. So when you're thinking about how am I presenting, even if you're just presenting data, have what is it they want to hear? What is it that's going to help them? And it psychologically takes the pressure off yourself as well. So that's something I wanted to add.
That's very, very nice. Yeah. And speaking about data, that actually leads us more or less directly to the next mistake.
Okay. Yes. So the next mistake I see people do is they just, especially people who are very data-driven, very head-based people, I would say, they focus just on the logical arguments, the figures, the numbers, the data, rather than really connecting at an emotional level with the audience. And what this leads me to is to talk about storytelling. So when you are presenting data, to be able to wrap a story around that data so that it really resonates, it really connects at the heart level rather than just the head level. And that might sound a bit weird, a bit strange, but if you really think about, yes, I have this fascinating data, but so what? What does this mean for the human being, the animal, depending on what data you're presenting on? So really personalize the data. And one of the models we talk about is when you tell a story, think about the CSR model. So it's challenge, solution, result. So first of all, think about, talk about the challenge. This is what the challenge is. This is the problems that people face. This is the solution. This is what we did or can do, or this is what the data is showing us. This is the solution. And then the result, these are the results of this. So you can ideally, it needs to be a story that's connected very much in the real world. I mean, that it's very creative presenters can do very, very off the wall, almost the point where you can't necessarily consciously make the link, and it's more of a subliminal link. And I've seen that done very cleverly. But telling stories, I use it all the time. I often will find on my way to do a training session, for example, something will happen that is a really good example of the model or the theory that I'm talking about. So I will use that as a real life example and say, you won't believe what happened this morning, blah, blah, blah. So telling stories really, really helps people connect. So you've got the logic, you've got the theory, but you're putting it into the real world. People remember stories.
Yeah. And I think we very often have a hard time, let's say, to come over with our data and embed it into a story. But I think it starts, let's say you report on an outcome of a clinical study. You start with, okay, our challenge is that we want to treat these patients, and therefore we need to have designed this study, and these are the kind of indicators for whether the study is successful. We have reached this one, but not all patients respond, but only these patients respond. These are kind of the different side effects, and here is the good benefit risk ratio, and so on. So that leads us to the conclusion that this treatment should only be prescribed for these patients. And that way you basically tell a story, and you can convince the people and embed emotions into it, rather than speaking about we did this test and it became significant, and this other test also became significant, and this third test was not significant anymore, and then we did multiplicity adjustment and blah 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 blah. So that's not a story. A story is a kind of you embed emotions into it. You give kind of a framework around it, and you offer conclusions.
Yeah, and I would say if it's something you find difficult to do, find somebody in your network who is good at it, or even sit down with a colleague and talk out the results, talk out the data, and say, help me make this more human, more help me humanize this into a story. So actually you'd be able to just brainstorm with a colleague of how you could create a story around it if it's something you find difficult to do.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, number 4, which I really love.
Being boring. So we can be boring because I could talk to you like this, and I could be very slow with the way I talk. So this one, I love this one too. I think, a podcast is a great example, right? So the energy, I have a very energetic voice. It's who I am. I leak energy off me, but that's part of my personality. If you are someone who is more internal in your energy, it's something to really think about. And I've been doing some work actually that I now share out with my clients about really trying to embody it's actually an archetype to connect with people and to really embody somebody who is connecting with the audience rather than just being a very sort of cold and monotonous voice on the end. So podcast is I think is really important to connect because all you have is your voice. With video, you can use, I can use my hands. I can reach out. I can almost reach out and touch the camera and to connect with people. And obviously, if I'm in a room, I can walk around, etc. So there's so many it's body language, it's voice, it's intonation. It's not speaking too fast, which is something I admit I do, especially when I get excited about a topic. It's about volume. It's about pausing. It's about asking different questions of the audience. It's about changing tone. It's about visuals. There's so much that falls into this, but we all know what it feels like to be in a presentation where we are looking at our watches thinking, oh my goodness, how much longer is this going to go on? And we all know when we've been in presentations that have just gone like a flash because we've just been so engaged. So there's many, many, many things that come under that of how not to be boring. I would start with your energy, how you are inside your head, how you're standing, even if it means you have to go and stand in the toilets before you go in and sort of move around and get yourself a little bit buzzed up. But it's that what you embody when you walk onto the platform of where you're going to be presenting. Really important.
Yeah, and I think there's also other things you can build in, like, is there some kind of entertaining aspects that you can bring in? Yeah, so even, maybe a small side joke or things like that can help a lot to kind of, still have the audience being listening to you. Because, yeah, and there I think is also, it's there's so many different ways. Also, visual says, can you kind of in your presentation have something that is more attractive rather than just a table? Can you do it in a way that is attractive to listen to or watch it?
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and I will say I use somebody who actually creates my slides for me. It's what they specialize in. So if you are somebody that needs to make boring slides look not boring, I'm certainly happy to share her details because she's very good at that. And it's you can use Prezi. There's different ways of presenting. There's some people love it, some people don't, and that's the risk. Sometimes you try and do something different, and then there'll always be somebody who doesn't like it and someone who does like it. I heard somebody tell me that when they watch a Prezi presentation, it makes them feel car sick. But I think that person was moving and zooming out, and it was all a bit manic. But there's some exciting things coming along with Prezi actually that you can do. So yes, so there's the technology side of it. The other thing I wanted to say is, just by asking questions of the audience and just saying, so this is my opinion on this, what's yours? Be interested in your thoughts. Who's got a comment? And inviting discussion. There's always going to be somebody in the room who will have a comment or an opinion. So that creates engagement. The other thing I see a lot now is the voting in a conference setting where people get to vote on different. So and you can do that online as well with training with using polls. So there's so much technology out there that you can use to get interactive and not boring. But what I would suggest again is if it's something you've not thought about before, don't try and do it all at once because it takes it's an evolution. Just try one or two new techniques each time until you get confident, and then add in another one.
Yeah, and that actually is a really, really nice head start into mistake number 5.
Yes, and actually they're linked. So mistake number 5 is ignoring the audience. So, and I can see this can be something that, especially if you're very nervous about standing up in front of people, you get very sort of into your own head and your heart's pounding and you're presenting some really technical data and all these thoughts are going on in your head. So you actually forget the audience is there and it becomes just your worst nightmare in public. So it's really important to try to stay calm and not not let the audience sense your nerves, even if they are there. The one thing I will say around just on that is to visualize yourself being confident. So there's visualization exercises can be done to really help, and I can talk more about this another time. But getting yourself, it's a bit that like the embodiment I was talking about with regards to not being boring. So embody yourself into a calm, almost. I talk about king and queen or king like state, so that when you walk on stage or you walk in front of the people, you are in a calm place, and then you are able to focus on them and not you. So it also links back to the second point around being really clear on why you're doing the presentation, to meet their needs. What is it they want, as opposed to you? You absolutely need to. They need to be make them part of your presentation, and then you won't be able to ignore them.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to kind of constantly try to connect with your audience. So especially if you're in a room with them, have eye contact. See how they are reacting. Do I need to adjust my presentation? Are they leaning in on the presentation, and do I have the perception they get it, or are they skeptical about things? Do they kind of or do they fade out? Do they start to play with phones and things like that? So these are, all these kind of things happen, and
absolutely,
and constantly kind of look for how they are reacting. And I think that is a little bit more challenging with the virtual setting. But there, as you said, asking questions, asking them to type something into the chat, these kind of things. And there, even if you just have a couple of people that turned on the camera, then at least you have a little bit of direct feedback. I think the worst thing is that you sit there for, let's say, 30 or 50 minutes in front of your PC and you're just staring at your slides. And then it's really, really difficult to kind of stay connected with the audience, because you're alone in a room just talking to yourself. And
sorry to interrupt, but just in connection with that, what I always do is called pre-framing. So when we start a session virtually, I will say, this is going to be an interactive session. I will be expecting you to chat in the chat room. In fact, can you all tell me, where are you sitting right now? So you're actually getting people to interact at the beginning in an informal way. And you keep inviting. And I run many training sessions this way. And sometimes I get no one answering, and I'll say, okay, is everyone still there? Because I'm not, and I will call them on it. I'm having no interaction here. And I get quite assertive about it. But by setting the expectation at the beginning, it doesn't come as a surprise to people. And actually, if you have got one or two people who are going to be on that call, you could almost prime them to be the ones that lead the discussion. And what you find is people then follow. So there's many techniques on that, but you do have to be quite a strong leader. Presenting is leading, right? So you're leading your audience. So there needs to be some quite strong leadership skills at the beginning, as when we're leading. And that to me is about setting the expectations of the behaviors you are expecting around interactivity for the session, because some people may not want interactivity. So it's exactly like whether you want questions throughout your presentation or at the end of your presentation, in a more traditional sense. So be the leader of the presentation, as long as you're making it about them.
Yeah, but I think setting expectations and priming people is already a really, really nice thing. I haven't done that too much, but I think also I think it's more natural if you're presenting to, let's say, your study team. Then, that's a little bit less of a topic. But even if you're already presenting to, let's say, your functional team or something like this, then maybe, the standard habit is not to ask question or something like this. And then, set the expectations differently is more important. Okay, let's come to number 6.
Okay, so number 6 is having a false start. So this is where, and there's different ways of interpreting this. I mean, a false start can fall into many different categories. So, for example, maybe start your presentation and something happens, or there is something, maybe your computer crashes or whatever, things haven't started well, to me, it's about using your intuition on this. So if it's only 30 seconds in, not 30 minutes, you might want to go, oh my goodness, this has been, and I would probably be quite authentic about it and just say, this hasn't started well, I'm going to start again. So, and go back to the beginning. But if it's 10 or 15 minutes in and things are going wrong, virtually, it's often technical. Sometimes you do just have to go, we need to stop this, we need to sort out the issues and we'll reschedule. So to take ownership of it. If it's you standing on a stage and things are going wrong, it's trying to, for example, if you're super nervous, and sometimes your mouth can go so dry that you can't speak. I would always say have water on stage. But if you haven't got any and you desperately need it, ask someone, can someone please bring me some water? So it's owning your power on that stage. Don't tell the audience you are nervous. How often I see people get on stage and go, oh, I'm feeling really nervous, because they don't need to know that, right? And actually, when we do our training, we video people at the beginning and at the end of the day, and there's a huge transformation. And what always comes out, one of the things that comes out, is they go, oh my goodness, I don't look nervous, but you have no idea what was going on inside. So we don't always leak the truth. You might be a bit breathless, but it soon calms down if you talk yourself through it. So the false start is I'd be interested in your experience, Alex, of false starts. Mine have normally been when it's been virtual, and things have gone wrong. And I have the odd time had to just say, right, I don't know what the problem is. We've tried the backup. We'll have to cancel. But it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I think the wrong start can be kind of that people directly jump into something without framing it, without kind of setting expectations. So sometimes you go into a meeting and people start talking about it and you have no clue where they're coming from. What's the point? And you first then need to stop them and say, where's that coming from? Why is that important? These kind of things. So I think setting the stage is really important, so that people know.
And owning it. Yeah, and owning it. You are the expert. You are the one with the, and actually not be afraid to say, I do not understand the context of the question you're asking me here. Can you help me understand? So it's really pushing back. All too often I hear people that, the fear, this is one of the things that I've been working on around. I'm working on a program at the moment I mentioned to you earlier about confidence. People being fearful of going into a meeting and being asked questions that they don't know the answers to. If you get asked a question you don't know the answer to, you just say, wow, great question. I don't know the answer to that. But let me come back to you and make sure you do. It's owning what you do know and owning what you don't know. And even if it's something that you should know, to be authentic and go, whoa, not thought about it like that before. I probably should know that. Let me come back. But it's answering it, it's owning it, and it's being confident even in the not knowing. And this is a lot of mindset stuff that people really need to. You are the expert. You probably know a lot more than anyone else in that room on the topic you've been asked to present on. And if you're younger, people who are older don't expect you to be as knowledgeable as them. So don't worry about the fact you're not. Experience comes with years. So be okay with who you are and how you're showing up. It's so much about what you're telling yourself in your head. It's so important.
Yeah, but it's really important to have a good start, because a good start is helps you to get good into the presentation. It helps you to have confidence, and it's also something that is much more remembered by the audience, what you say at the beginning. So there is this psychological effect that you can, remember things that are in the beginning more. And so having there a very, very good point is important. That's actually one of the reasons why I usually don't have something like an agenda slide at the beginning, because I really want to have something more impactful at the beginning rather than an agenda slide. Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, in our program, we recommend that you practice the first 60 seconds of your presentation over and over and over. Record yourself doing it, so that first 60 seconds you're making a really positive impression.
But there's another area which you will primarily remember, and that is about mistake number 7.
Yes, which is about ending weakly, or ending lamely, sort of just fizzling out at the end of your presentation and not really summarising and not making it memorable. There are 3 things that people come or expect from a presentation. Firstly, to be educated. Secondly, to be entertained. And thirdly, to be inspired. And the inspiration piece is something to really think about here. So, what is it that you can give to them at the end that will enable them to leave or feel that they have really experienced something of value? Now, it could be giving them what we would call a call to action. So, I've shared all this amazing information with you. Now, what you need to do is go and have a conversation with your manager or share this with your team, but give them something to do that they can go away and take action on and implement the things that they have learnt in that presentation. So it's really, you're absolutely right. The beginning and the end are the 2 most important parts of the presentation.
Yeah. So don't end with kind of, and here are the technical details. It's more kind of, and here are the main points, and this is really the most important piece.
And thank you very much. Goodbye. Yeah. Fizzle out. Yeah. No, it needs to be and also think about your intonation, your energy, really staying connected, but then inviting them to a next step, whatever that next step is.
And have a really nice last slide, which kind of has the summary points on it.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to have a thank you slide. Yes. You just have your last slide and that's it.
Yes, and I would definitely recommend you have your contact details on that last slide in case there are further questions. Whatever environment you're in, whether it's internal or external, it's always important to have people follow up. And if you're in the market of promoting what you're doing and what you're talking about, then to have your social media, et cetera, so how people can connect with you, and inviting them to connect with you on LinkedIn is always a really positive thing to do as well. There's many. We could have a whole talk about that as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, so you already mentioned earlier that you have actually a program that helps people to achieve all these kind of things. What's so special about this program?
Great question. We have several programs actually, but this specific one that we're sort of focusing on today is called Presenting with Impact. And what is special about this program? If I could just share some of the feedback we get from it. We have people of all levels go on this program, from beginners right through to senior execs who've been presenting all their life, and we often get the feedback such as, "I've done many presentation skills training in my career." But this has been by far the most impactful on my style and how I present. So we focus on how do you get the message right that you're delivering. So if you think about some of the technical messages that you have to give in your world, it's how do we tailor that so that we really, really have that clear outcome. We really get to the heart of what the person we're presenting to needs. So we really tailor the message. So we help them with the actual content and the message. We then look at the structure. How do you do a really good presentation with simple messages? And then we look at the delivery technique. So we help the delegates with their confidence, how to stay calm, how to really be impactful, have presence, and how to tell stories. So and the other thing we also look at is how to be confident with handling difficult questions as well. So, we do all of this in a day, and we use video. So we help people, and a lot of people go, "Oh, don't want to use video." It's so powerful, and it actually helps you increase your confidence because you see the transition from the contrast from the first thing in the morning to the end of the day. There's such an improvement. It's amazing. So yeah, we get really strong feedback about it.
And it's a one-day meeting on site, and
yeah. Yes. So ideally, all together in a groups of 6 to 8. Anything more than that, you don't get that one-to-one coaching. You can do bigger groups. We do bigger groups, but you don't get that one-to-one feedback on each of the presentations. So in groups of 6 to 8, in one day is how we run it. We can do half days. It would have to be a smaller group, really, and we can do virtual. I mean, it absolutely could be done virtually, but generally people like when you're doing it in a room, the energy that you get from each other and the inspiration and the learning when you watch somebody else doing it. But there's no reason why you couldn't do it in a virtual setting as well, as long as everybody was on their cameras and happy to be. So you could do it virtually.
But you come to the companies and then do it at the companies usually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all over. Not just we're based in the UK, but we go all over Europe.
Yeah, and you can find everything on zest4.com or in the show notes, where we will link to this program. And the last thing that I wanted to speak about today with Julia is Julia comes with a little bit of a present today. So let's talk about that.
Yes.
Yes.
We could call this a call to action, couldn't we, Alex? So I was going to offer 30-minute call to explore any area really around your presenting or anything around sort of personally helping you be more impactful, whether it's working virtually or face to face with your teams. I was going to offer 5 30-minute sessions to the first 5 people who reach out, and you can contact me at Julia, Julia, at zest4.com. zestfor.com, and we can have a 30-minute conversation, and I will share it with you as much as I possibly can in 30 minutes to maybe give you some guidance and pointers to help you improve in those areas.
Awesome. This is really, really nice of you. And I hope all the listeners take action from this call to action and write an email quickly to Julia Carter. It's first come, first serve basis. And then we go on from there. And of course, as always, you can find this in the show notes. Just go to theeffectivestatistician.com, find this episode, and or you just click on your smartphone where you maybe just listening this, and you can find the show notes there as well. Awesome. Thanks so much, Julia. This was a really, really nice discussion about presenting with impact. And I think we covered important things of how to avoid common mistakes. So making sure that the logistics are all set up. Make sure you are clear on what you want to achieve with the presentation. Focus beyond logical arguments, also in the emotions and the feelings of the audience. Don't bore the audience to death, but have good gesture. Have your voice speak to them. Maybe embed some jokes. Connect with your audience so that you don't lose them. And make sure that they are engaged. Focus on your start and on your end so that you have a good start to make you confidence and a good end where people get the take-home message. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a nice time.
Thank you.
This show was created in association with PSI. Thanks for listening. Please visit theeffectivestatistician.com to find the show notes and learn more about our podcast to boost your career as a statistician in the health sector. Next week, we'll have another awesome topic. And don't forget to sign up for the email writing challenge. So, reach your potential, lead great science, and serve patients. Just be an effective statistician.